What's happening, creatures? Tim Kreitz here, Tim Kreitz Adventures. What is this, a garage talk vlog? We have not done one of these episodes in a long time, but I have an excellent subject to discuss, and I hope you will enjoy it. Stick around. It's an age-old question in motorcycling and a hot topic for controversy since first argued about. And recently, it's one that SHADETREE surgeon and I got into an online tussle over with this snowflakey collectivist truth warrior type named Ricky Holtsclaw. But we'll talk more about Mr. Holdsclaw later. First, let's address the fundamental question in a way that's fair to both sides of the argument. Do loud pipes save lives? In other words, does running a louder aftermarket exhaust on your motorcycle automatically mean that the extra sound produced will announce your presence to all the distracted, half-brained, texting-obsessed drivers around you and guarantee that you'll never die in a traffic accident due to not being noticed on your motorcycle? The short answer is no. But let's change the question up to something more realistic and reasonable. Is sound a form of sensory information? Yes, that's right, it is. And is the consideration of sensory information one of the primary ways humans make behavioral decisions? Yes, affirmative. So, is there a reasonable probability that making your motorcycle louder can, in some cases, increase your effective presence and noticeability in traffic? Absolutely it can. And while nothing is foolproof or 100% safe in life, after all, Mr. Webster defines safety as the absence of risk, which does not exist anywhere on this earth at any time for anyone, we do know empirically that human beings usually respond well to high contrasts in sensory input. For example, we may not always notice the difference between light gray and medium gray, but most of us will darn sure be drawn to the contrast between bright pink and black, for example. The same goes for contrasts in sound, and there's a reason for this. It's part of how our survival instincts work. When we hear a wild animal growling or howling in the middle of the night when we're on a camping trip, we take notice of that. When we stumble upon a colony of yellow hornets contrasting against the gray of their nest, we take notice of that. Those same governors of our instincts aren't suddenly turned off when applied to traffic dynamics. Those against louder bikes always use the same old tired argument that there's no reliable data to support the claim that loud pipes save lives. And to a degree, they're actually correct. But that's unfortunately not how arguments are proven in logical operations. The hard truth of the contention is that the same unverifiable burden of proof falls on their side of the argument. It also cannot be proven that making a bike quieter results in more safety for the rider. And therein lies the stalemate and the battleground where common sense must be employed. This brings us back to Ricky Holtsclaw, who announced his presence very loudly and very confidently in the comments of SHADETREE's "This is Why People Hate Harleys" episode. I won't go into the details of that episode or the exchange of comments Josh and I shared with this guy. Instead, I'll just link it below. You guys can look at it for yourself. But for the sake of keeping this video at a somewhat reasonable length, suffice it to say that Mr. Holtsclaw is a retired cop, an activist, and a cause chaser who seems to hate motorcycles in general to me. He holds religiously to the mantra that louder bikes cannot be in any way safer, not in any circumstance, and advocates severe criminal penalties for anyone who dares replace the stock exhaust on his or her motorcycle. I think you guys can see where this is going. In short, Josh and I, using largely respectable and civil discourse, mind you, shut down his argument pretty soundly. So effectively, in fact, that he became pretty upset and later engaged in a straw man personal attack toward me on his vlog. Real classy. And while his arguments against aftermarket exhausts, many of which are perfectly legal for road use and have proper EPA stamping and all that stuff, by the way, were filled with confirmation bias, base rate neglect, tons of other logical fallacies this guy used, you do have to reasonably sympathize with at least some of his points of view. What he has right, in my opinion, is the obvious stuff. Nobody likes being startled awake in the middle of the night by a Harley rider with Coke bottle pipes on his bike and his huge big bore V-twin engine at full throttle. Come on, let's be intellectually honest with ourselves as motorcyclists about this issue. The reality of this is there are plenty of people on both sides of this social problem who are perfectly content to be complete irrational dicks about it. That makes the need for the rest of us, who fall somewhere in the reasonable middle between the Ricky Holtsclaws and the open pipe V-twin jerks of the world, to be considerate of one another and find a way to all get along while all getting more or less what we want. If you're going to employ an aftermarket exhaust on your bike, that's great. I have them on all three of mine back here. But there's a difference between getting your bikes to make enjoyable sounds that improve your overall presence on the road and being so loud that you rattle windows, set off car alarms, and frighten old ladies. That kind of volume is generally unreasonable, especially if you live in a city. At the same time, if you are determined to be an absolute tyrant about any and all motorcycle noise like our buddy Ricky, you too are also unreasonable. The moral of this story is that to a degree, we all need to be willing to support each other's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, even if it means being inconvenienced by each other's behaviors once in a while. The population of the world has more than tripled over the past 100 years, and it shows no signs of slowing. In the interest of human harmony, we must be mindful of being permissive of others' behaviors even when we don't like them too much, while at the same time not being so invasive in our behaviors that we overstep reasonable and prudent boundaries. A complete lack of social order is a bad thing, but so is too much social order. Both extremes bring down the quality of human life, reduce our freedom, happiness, and the amount of peace we experience. It's something to think about, and if approached with the proper social intercourse in mind, can render this whole loud pipes thing to be moot. So I'll end this episode of Tim Kreitz Adventures with the words I often use to end many of my videos. Take care of yourselves and take care of one another. See you next time.